Hi, I'm Chvátal, the chairman of TAMUS, and I have one question for you. Did you observe, traveling on the Jewish cemeteries in Europe, different shapes of gravestones in different eras? A few years ago, I was very curious about the history of different shapes of gravestones, different stonemason workshops, and I researched this topic in the Tachov region. The first of the oldest gravestone types was made in one anonymous workshop, stonemason workshop, what I named the Telice workshop, according to its production, its area in which we found its production, its gravestones. And the first type has only one area with inscription bordered by engraved line without any ornaments, and the text is quite brief, quite short, and you can find from this inscription name and date of death of the buried person. Here in the cemetery of Telice we have many examples of this type of gravestones. The second type, so-called Telice type number 2, has the inscription divided to two areas. In the bottom area is the main text, main inscription, and in the top area are only two characters, the abbreviation which means here is buried, Ponik Bar in Hebrew. Here in the Telice cemetery we have also many examples of these gravestone types. For example, here or here in this row. Because the production of the Telice workshop was the same shape 60 years, it must be the same workshop in 2 or 3 generations. Its production is in many cemeteries in surrounding, like in this one in Schweising for German. This shape of gravestones was so well known that local people made fakes of those gravestones for itself, like this one example in Svajšín. This is one of the gravestones made in the Langendorfler's workshop. The typical is the complicated border with many ornaments in the Baroque arc with spheres, and the inscription is not divided. It is a unique area, and the characters are quite big, deeply engraved. Inscription is relatively brief, and in the ending of inscription is the date of death. This one gravestone is from 1755. The next type of gravestones is so-called ornamental type. It was designed in ending of 18th century after 1790, and for this type it's typical ornamental characters with so much ornaments the inscription is very difficult to read. However, there are no more ornaments except in the characters. The border of gravestones is also very ornamental, and the border of those gravestones is maybe up to 3 times as the usual border, and very usual is also Baroque arc in the terminal of gravestone. By origin, from the Purschau workshop was 2 types of gravestone. The Purschau type number 1 is typical with its small gravestones, very brief inscription, big characters, rounded characters, deeply engraved, no ornaments, with large border, large piedrua, and in its terminal low arc. The Purschau type number 2 has narrow characters in the inscription, very brief inscription, and it is beginning of the influence of so-called empire style. Maybe it was also the second generation in the same workshop, in the same stonemason school. The next type, typical for the empire style, empire era, it means beginning of the 19th century, is so-called oriental type. For this type is typical the so-called oriental arc in the terminal of gravestone, and the inscription is divided to two parts. The top parts is usual only the date of death, and in the bottom part is the rest of inscription, including name and or residence, occupation, etc. Many of gravestones of Oriental type are decorated by spheres, cones or cylinders, and we can find many fakes of Oriental gravestones made by local people according to the style of this era. Next example of the newer era is the gravestone from the so-called Woodall's Stonemason workshop, named after one of his works, the gravestone of local businessman Solomon Woodall. The original name of the workshop of the stonemason is unknown, and we called this workshop according to the inscription, the gravestone inscription of this local businessman. Typical is the Baroque arc in the top of the gravestone, small characters in the inscription, and relatively long text, long inscription. On the border of gravestone is engraved the large piedra around the wall inscription. Here in Telice are many examples of this type, and they are probably production of one workshop, the so-called Voodoo Stonemason workshop, like this one, or wall this row. The next type of the newer era was so-called Kuttenplan type, because its examples are mostly in Chodová plana, Kuttenplan in German. This type is typical by its zero artificial expression. It is without any ornaments. The characters are like technical, and maybe that those gravestones are result of an influence of a strong aesthetic spiritual authority. Called Schweissing type is very similar to the last one, except of the first row of the inscription, which is often written to the arc shape, and both of those types are from the late era. However, they are still strongly Orthodox, written only in Hebrew. Based on our research of the anonymous Jewish gravestones from the older era, we can put the line to the map of Tahoe region between the western and eastern part. In western part was the main stonemason workshop in Langendorf-Lass, and its production was bought only in this western part of our region. The eastern part was independent as well, and its stonemason workshop, for example, the Telice workshop, sold its production only to the eastern part of our region. Why the border between two parts of our region was put to the map, why they were independent in the stonemason production, it is a mystery. In the 19th century was founded in this area a big iron factory in connection with railway, which was being built in close distance. And in 1872 the railway was also down, and the iron factory didn't make sense anymore. The new entrepreneur, Lugner from Plan, bought this area, this factory, former iron factory, and he started here the production of the stone monuments, gravestones, industrial stone plates for electric installation, etc., etc. According to its announcement in newspapers, he imported also the material from Sweden, so-called Swedish cyanide, and polished granite, of course, and many materials usual for the era of Jewish emancipation from 19th and 20th century. This is one of examples of work of the stonemason workshop Joseph Lugner, made from the Swedish cyanide. The dark polished stone with small parts of blue stone, very decorative. And the signature of the stonemason workshop Joseph Lugner is here. The origin of this stone is really Swedish. I found one evidence of its origin in the Jewish cemetery in Helsinki, Finland, where I found many stones made from this material. So this stone is really my origin from the Northern Europe. Another stonemason workshop from the Emancipation era is the workshop of Böhm in Scheibenradisch, Okrouhlé hradiště in Czech. Originally, this family lived in Germany, near the border area, in Hermannsdorf. Later they moved to Scheibenradisch, where was founded very important and well-known stonemason workshop, and we can recognize its work according to the signature on the bottom of this gravestone. The stonemason factory of Der Ritz had its own stone pit in close distance from Muttersdorf. Nowadays the former stone pit is a nature conservation area, and before World War II the cyanide of Muttersdorf was exported to Vienna, and the workshop was directly in Muttersdorf up to World War II. You can find its signatures in many Jewish cemeteries in this region, and also in many village monuments, the monuments of soldiers from World War I, etc., etc. The cyanide of Muttersdorf was used in Vienna only as a building material because of the silicate stripes in the stone. However, in the area of West Bohemia it was used also for monuments and gravestones. Very important stonemason workshop was in Pilsen, and its works are in the whole area surrounding Pilsen. Its name was Johann Singrosch, and its production was the polished granite mostly, and other materials designated in the Emancipation era. In this workshop was made also the bottom of the monument of Emperor Mary Theresia in Vienna, between the Culture Historical Museum and the Nature Museum, on the place of Maria Theresia. When this monument was made, the Emperor Franz Joseph I has visited the workshop in Pilsen and awarded Johann Singrosch by the award, the important award, and given him the title of Emperor's Stonemason Master. His works, his gravestones or other monuments are in many villages, many towns in this area, but this workshop produced also the technical stones for electric, for installation, electric installation, etc., etc. The gravestone, not only gravestones, but other monuments and of this workshop were produced up to World War II. The gravestones from the newer era are without the artistic design, without the original artistic expression. They are the same shape like the gravestones in the non-Jewish burial places, non-Jewish cemeteries. However, from this newer era, we have exact information about their producers, about the stonemason workshops. The older era, 17th century, is anonymous. We didn't any possibility to get the names of stonemasons, but their artistic expression is original. It was the era of original and non-repeatable artistic expression. Thank you for your attention.